name is ZeBirdBrain, and today we're talking about compositing, but more specifically, blurs. Yes, blurs, because Harmony has a ton of them, and usually people don't know how to use them, so they use the Gaussian blur for everything. I mean, Gaussian blur is not bad. But hey, let me tell you about all the other wonderful blurs that you can use to blur out your scenes. Considering the sheer amount of different blurs we have in this software, I will have to show them to you in different videos. So this is gonna be part 1 of maybe like 2 or 3 videos, I don't know. We'll see where it takes us. And to show around these cool effects, I will be using Tiger. Tiger is a character from Bad at Being Good, which is the story I'm writing with friends. If you're interested in learning more about it, you can always visit my Discord server, and we have a channel just for that. Wink wink. Okay, so I took a minute to bring all of these nodes into the node view. So this is, unless I'm forgetting one of them, all of the nodes that can contribute to blurring your assets in Harmony. So you have Blur Box, Blur, and Blur Gaussian. These are usually the one that you can default to either blur out something that is close to your camera or far away from your camera. Like, these are the usual blurs that you would find like in most softwares. After that, you also have the matte blur and the bokeh blur. These are blur that I consider more like aesthetic blur because they can change the color of what you're gonna blur on top of just blurring it. I mean, you can use the matte blur as a regular blur, but you know, it's why? You can just use a blur to blur it. So, you know, matte blur and bokeh blur has some added potential to their skills. After that, you have the blur that I consider a bit more like active blur, like that requires some movement. So motion blur and motion blur legacy, these are blurs that are going to blur out your things once you move them, either by moving the camera or by moving an animation by dragging a peg around, for example. You also have the blur radial zoom, which usually serves the purpose of blurring a scene when you make a quick camera move. And you also have the blur directional, which is going to blur, but from one specific direction. Then you have the blur variable. This is like a normal blur. It's just that there's a little mask to it, so it's going to allow you to blur things only at a certain spot of a drawing. And last but not least, you have the focus node. The focus node doesn't say blur in the name, but it's something that's gonna blur an element according to distance. Very, very cool to make a quick multiplane setup. Okay, so these are like the basic nodes. I'm gonna show them on Tiger, like one by one, but I'm not gonna dive too much into the details because, like I said, I will make specific videos for a bunch of them. And of course, just like with any kind of nodes into the software, don't forget to go check the documentation. So you go to Harmony, pick the version that you have, and then you can head over here, type blur, press enter, and you're gonna find all that information. Okay, you don't even need my YouTube channel, it's all there. So what I like to do usually is I just click on one of them at random. And what I like is that they're all gonna be there into the little side box. Don't know how that's called. And there's a clear example of how they differ from one another. So back to the video. So first I'm going to take my blur and slide it onto my character. To do that, you can press on Alt or Option on your keyboard and just slide it. Super easy. Then I press on the yellow box to be able to edit the parameters of my blur. If you're annoyed with the yellow box and you do a lot of compositing, you can also go in the plus sign here and find the layer properties window. I'm gonna take this and tear it off. And then maybe just place it either here in between my 2 windows or up there, just depending on what you prefer. Just like that. And then you can just arrange it the way that you prefer. So now if I click on any given nodes, it's just gonna stay there. Little pro trick like that. So yeah, blur box, what it's going to do is it's going to just blur your image. It usually makes a very like squarish result, so it's very cheap to render, but it also looks a bit cheap, so it's not always the best choice for like a very close-up thing like that. Then you have the radial blur, which is going to have a similar result, so just going to blur your stuff, but it's a bit more foggy and it's gonna blur things in a radial way, hence the name. Then you have blur Gaussian, which is also going to blur things in a foggy way, just a bit different than the radial blur. It tends to be a bit more foggy and smooth than the other blurs, but it's also a bit more taxing on your computer. So if you compare blur Gaussian and blur box, blur Gaussian is a bit more expensive to render, but you know, it arguably looks better than the blur box. But you don't always need it to look good. Sometimes you're just needing a quick blur for quick effects, and the Gaussian blur is too much, and blur box is just enough. You also have the blur directional that we were talking about. If you put it, it's going to blur, but only in one direction, as you can see here. Very great for like movement and whatnot. You also have the matte blur. Matte blur is going to give a single color to your layer on top of blurring it. So, you know, if I go to the radius here, I can blur it and it's gonna be blurry. And you can use the matte color, so technically it's blurring your layer. Oftentimes when I make effects and whatnot, I really love to use the matte blur, but it's not necessarily something I'm gonna use to just flat out blur a layer. That's what blur radial, blur box, and blur Gaussian would be. Then you have the bokeh blur, which is like very aesthetic blur. And of course, to see the result of your blurs, you need to be in render view. And if I look at the bokeh blur, the way that it works is it's going to blur your image. And it always works better with like the whole image, like this. And when I blur it, depending on the radius, it's going to blur your image, but using different kind of shapes. So I have a full video about it, but it's a very cool aesthetic blur that can serve many purposes, such as flashbacks or making cool light effects. Very interesting. You also have the blur variable, so if I use that on my tiger, it's not gonna do much at the moment. But if I take an image and I place it into the mask and I draw on these image, you can use that into the blur variable to be able to blur either the opaque spot or the transparent spot. See here? Da-da-da. So now only where I drew will I see the blurriness. And it's nice because you can also just draw it after the fact. So I have my node, and now at the moment everything will be blurry, but where I draw, I will not see the blur. So it can be very useful if you just want to have a certain part of your drawing that is blurred. And you also have the radial blur zoom, which is going to be there to usually blur like your whole scene, and it has these kind of pre-made ways that it's gonna blur it. So if I show it now, it's gonna have like these crazy lines, and it's got different kind of ways that you can blur it. So that's the radial blur zoom. And you also have the motion blurs. The motion blur is going to be blurring your animation in a direction that you give it, either with a peg or with the camera. And then you have the focus node. The focus node is very interesting because if you have a multiplane setup, like if I take my tiger and I bring it closer to my camera, if you don't know how to do that, look at my multiplane video. And with the focus node here, because it has no peg attached, it means that everything that is at the 0, point in distance will be clear. But if I move things in front or behind, they're gonna get increasingly blurry if I go further from the midground. Unless I take the focus node and I attach it to where that thing is. So now my tiger is right here. If I take a peg and I connect it to my focus node, now this is gonna be clear and the rest is gonna be blurry. It's very nice to get a quick and easy setup going on, but if you want a lot of control and finesse in your work, I don't recommend it. You can always fake this using any of the basic blurs. But I do love that the focus node is very, very quick to use, and once you get comfortable with it, we also have the focus multiplier that can be used to add more control to your stuff. But that's for another video. So I hope that you appreciated this very quick dive into these wonderful blur nodes, and I will see you again next time for a more detailed approach. Bye!